I've never understood why they always show aliens as these super advanced enlightened beings, Lieutenant Kira Davis remarked, absently swirling her coffee in its standard-issue metal mug. I mean, humans barely have our shit together after thousands of years of civilization. Why would squid people from Andromeda be any different? Commander Elliot Barnes snorted, not bothering to look up from his data pad. Bold of you to assume we have our shit together at all, Davis. Fair point, she conceded with a grin. The observation deck of the UNS Defiant offered the best view on the ship. Not that there was much to see at the moment beyond the endless black of space punctuated by distant stars. Earth's first diplomatic vessel designed specifically for first contact scenarios was currently parked in a holding pattern, waiting for clearance to approach Nexus Station, the supposed neutral meeting ground established by the Galactic Concord. Lieutenant Davis took another sip of her coffee, grimaced, and set it down. Did you read the briefing on the Zoraxians? Apparently, they communicate partially through pheromones. Ambassador Wu is concerned we might accidentally tell their delegation to go fuck themselves just by sweating wrong. That's why everyone on the diplomatic team got those suppression shots, Barnes replied, finally looking up. Though I maintain those things make everything taste like metal for a week. Small price to pay to avoid an interstellar incident. Speak for yourself. My breakfast burrito tasted like I was licking a battery. The comms panel beeped insistently, drawing their attention. Barnes swiped the screen to answer. Commander! Captain Helena Ortiz's voice came through clear and crisp. I need you and Lieutenant Davis in the briefing room. Now. The abrupt end to the transmission left both officers exchanging glances. That didn't sound good, Davis muttered, abandoning her coffee and heading for the door. When does it ever? Barnes sighed, falling in step beside her. The briefing room was already crowded when they arrived. Captain Ortiz stood at the head of the table, her face set in what the crew had come to call her diplomatic crisis expression. Ambassador Wu and his team occupied one side of the table, while several military officers filled the other. Good, you're here, Ortiz nodded to them. Take a seat. Davis slid into an empty chair, noting the tension in the room. Something had clearly gone sideways. 15 minutes ago, Ortiz began without preamble. We received this transmission from Nexus Station. She tapped a command, and a holographic display flickered to life above the center of the table. The image showed a cavernous space that appeared to be some sort of public forum. Beings of various species, most unfamiliar to human eyes, were gathered in tiered seating around a central platform. On that platform stood 5 human women, hands bound behind their backs, with what were unmistakably nooses around their necks. Davis felt her blood run cold. These are the scientists from the Uppsala research vessel, Ambassador Wu said quietly. They were reported missing 3 standard months ago while investigating an anomaly in the Vega sector. The Uppsala was a civilian research vessel, one of the military officers interjected. Unarmed, with no military significance whatsoever. Are they... Davis began, unable to finish the question. They're alive, for now, Ortiz replied grimly. This is a live feed. The Galactic Concord is apparently conducting what they call a justice proceeding. Their accusation is that these scientists violated their laws by entering a restricted zone. And their punishment is public execution? Barnes asked incredulously. It gets worse, Wu said. Watch. A being stepped forward on the platform. Tall, vaguely reptilian, with an elaborate collar that shimmered with embedded technology. When it spoke, its actual vocalizations were a series of clicks and hisses, but a translation followed immediately. The primitives from Sol 3 have repeatedly ignored our warnings. They send their vessels into sacred spaces. They disrupt the cosmic harmony. They pollute the ethereal planes with their crude technologies. The Council has been merciful, but mercy without justice is weakness. The reptilian being made a sweeping gesture toward the 5 women. These trespassers were found at the sacred nexus of Vega, a violation that carries the sentence of spiritual severance. As is tradition, they will be given the opportunity for final words, though we doubt their primitive minds can grasp the magnitude of their transgressions. The camera zoomed in on the face of one of the women, a scientist with short-cropped gray hair and defiant eyes. When offered the chance to speak, she lifted her chin. My name is Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, lead xenobiologist of the Uppsala expedition. We were conducting non-invasive scans of a spatial anomaly. We had no knowledge this region was restricted. We received no warnings, no communications of any kind before our ship was boarded and our crew separated. If we've violated your customs, we apologize and request the opportunity to make amends. But I must also say this, Earth will not stand for the execution of innocent civilians. as opposed to the public execution of 5 of our civilians, which is what exactly? A friendly gesture? The Concorde outmatches us technologically in every way, Wu insisted. We have exactly 1 ship capable of interstellar travel. They have fleets. Then they should have thought of that before they decided to mess with humans, Hayes replied coolly. Besides, I'm not suggesting we declare war. I'm suggesting we extract our people and then have a frank discussion about interspecies etiquette. Davis couldn't help but admire the Admiral's confidence, even as she recognized the insanity of what was being proposed. 5 lives against potential conflict with an entire galactic community. Permission to speak freely, Admiral? She asked. Hayes nodded. Go ahead, Lieutenant. I volunteer for the extraction team. I've completed the OIS training program, and before transferring to diplomatic services, I served 2 tours with special reconnaissance. Barnes stared at her in surprise, but Davis kept her eyes fixed on the Admiral. Hayes studied her for a moment. Commendable, Lieutenant, but I'll be assembling a team from our specialists. Your knowledge of the diplomatic protocols may be more valuable in the aftermath. With respect, Admiral, that's exactly why I should go. I understand both the tactical requirements and the diplomatic stakes. And... Davis hesitated, then continued. I knew Dr. Mitchell before she joined the Uppsala mission. She was my professor at the academy. I owe her. A moment of silence fell over the room as Hayes considered this. Very well, Lieutenant. Report to Lieutenant Commander Reed for briefing. You'll be on Alpha Team. Hayes turned to the rest of the room. Let me be absolutely clear. This operation is sanctioned by Earth's Unified Defense Council. Any fallout will be managed at the highest levels. Our immediate priority is the safe return of our people. Ambassador Wu looked like he wanted to continue objecting but ultimately remained silent. Let's move, people, Hayes commanded. We have 23 hours and 45 minutes until our window closes. As the meeting broke up, Barnes caught Davis by the arm. Are you insane? This is a suicide mission. Davis offered him a thin smile. Maybe, but I'd rather die trying than watch them hang 5 innocent women while we sit here drafting strongly worded objections. Just come back in one piece, okay? Who else is going to mock my breakfast choices? I'll do my best, she promised, before heading off to find Commander Reed and the rest of Alpha Team. 6 hours later, Lieutenant Kira Davis found herself squeezed into a tactical insertion pod along with 5 other OIS specialists. The cramped compartment smelled of sweat, lubricant for their weapons, and the distinct odor of the stealth coating that had been applied to their armor. Comfortable? Grinned Specialist Zhang from across the narrow space, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners. Like a 5-star hotel, Davis replied dryly. If the hotel was designed by a sadistic sardine. Chatter discipline, people, Lieutenant Commander Reed warned from the front of the pod, though there was no real heat in his voice. Everyone was on edge, and a little gallows humor was to be expected. The plan was simultaneously simple and insanely complex. The UNS Defiant would approach Nexus Station under the pretense of accepting the Concorde's invitation to witness the justice proceeding. Meanwhile, 3 insertion pods would launch from the ship's far side, using the vessel itself as cover from the station's sensors. The pods would attach to predetermined points on the station's outer hull, and the teams would cut their way in through maintenance access panels identified from the schematics they'd managed to obtain. From there, Alpha Team, Davis's team, would head straight for the detention level where the Uppsala scientists were being held. Beta Team would secure their exit route, while Gamma Team would create a diversion in the station's primary power distribution center. Theoretically, they could be in and out within 40 minutes, back on the Defiant before the Concorde realized what had happened. Theoretically. 2 minutes to launch, came Captain Ortiz's voice over the comm. All teams, final systems check. Reed led them through the rapid verification of their equipment. Atmosphere regulators, weapons systems, comms, breach tools, everything checked out. Admiral Hayes is personally overseeing this operation from the bridge, Ortiz continued. She asked me to remind you all that the objective is extraction only. Minimize contact with Concord personnel. Avoid casualties if possible. But the safe return of our people is the absolute priority. Understood, Captain. Reed responded for all of them. Good hunting. Launch in 60 seconds. Davis closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The familiar pre-mission calm settled over her, slowing her heartbeat, sharpening her senses. When she opened her eyes again, she found Zhang watching her. University professor, huh? He said quietly. Mitchell must have been something special. She was, Davis confirmed. She taught comparative xenobiology. Made us all believe that when we finally met aliens, it would be this grand, enlightening experience. That the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. Zhang checked the charge on his stun baton. Well, we're about to give the Concord a crash course in human determination. That's pretty enlightening. 10 seconds to launch, Ortiz announced. Good luck, Alpha Team. The pod's internal lights dimmed to combat red, and Davis felt the subtle shift in gravity as the insertion vessel detached from its housing. The sensation of acceleration was minimal. The pods were designed to move slowly at first to avoid detection, but she could tell they were now on their own, flying through the vacuum toward Nexus Station. Let me tell you something about humans, Reed said quietly as they drifted through space. Throughout our history, we've made one consistent mistake when encountering new civilizations. We always assume they think like we do, that they share our values, our sense of justice, our respect for life. The pod rotated slightly, giving them a brief glimpse through the small viewport of the massive structure that was Nexus Station. A sprawling collection of interconnected modules, domes, and antennae, like some bizarre deep-sea creature rendered in metal and composite materials. But there's one thing aliens should understand about us, Reed continued. We're the species that named a mission to save stranded astronauts Apollo 13 after our god of healing. We're the species that once sent a rescue team into a war zone to save one private. We don't leave our people behind, ever. And if these Concord folks think public executions are going to intimidate us into compliance, they're about to learn a very painful lesson about human psychology. The pod shuddered slightly as its magnetic clamps engaged with the station's hull. Attachment confirmed, reported Specialist Okafor from the pilot's seat. Beginning breach sequence. Davis checked her weapon one last time, a compact pulse rifle designed to incapacitate rather than kill, and activated her tactical display. The augmented reality overlay highlighted her teammates and projected their planned route through the station. Remember, Reed said as the cutting tool began to slice through the hull, we're not here to start a war. We're here to prevent one. Get our people and get out. Anyone who gets in our way gets stunned, not killed. The cutting tool completed its circle, and the section of hull was carefully removed, revealing the dark interior of a maintenance shaft. Alpha Team is in, Reed reported over the comm. Beginning infiltration. One by one they slipped into Nexus Station, the first humans to ever enter the headquarters of the Galactic Concord uninvited. Davis was the fourth to enter, the recycled air of the station hitting her nostrils with a strange alien scent, something like ozone mixed with cinnamon and copper. 500 meters to detention level, Zhang murmured, consulting his display. They moved quickly through the narrow maintenance corridors, encountering no resistance. According to their intelligence, these service tunnels were primarily maintained by automated systems rather than living beings. The first true test would come when they needed to exit the maintenance level and enter the main station. Reed held up a closed fist as they approached the access hatch, and the team immediately froze. Bioscanners detected, he whispered, checking his instruments. They'll flag us as human immediately. Zhang pulled a small device from his pack, a signal disruptor designed by Earth's best engineers based on what little they understood of Concord technology. This might buy us 30 seconds before their systems adapt, he said, attaching it to the scanner panel. After that, we're compromised, Reed nodded. That's all we need. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Zhang activated the disruptor, and the scanner panel flickered momentarily before turning green. Reed wasted no time, punching in the override sequence they'd extracted from the stolen schematics. The hatch slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond lay a corridor far more elaborate than the utilitarian maintenance tunnels. The walls gleamed with an iridescent material that seemed to shift colors subtly as they moved. The ceiling was high, clearly designed to accommodate species taller than humans, and the lighting came from no visible source. The entire space simply glowed with a soft, ambient light. Clear, whispered Specialist Okafor, who had taken point. No movement detected. They moved swiftly down the corridor, their boots making almost no sound thanks to the sound-dampening technology built into their armor. Davis kept her weapon at the ready, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. The detention level, according to their intelligence, was one level down. They located an access shaft, something like a vertical corridor with gravity manipulation that allowed beings to simply step into it and be transported up or down. These are monitored, Reed warned. Once we use this, the clock is ticking. Gamma Team is in position, came a voice over their secure comm. Ready to initiate diversion on your mark. Reed gave a curt nod. Gamma Team, execute diversion. Alpha Team, prepare to move. Moments later, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The lighting in their corridor shifted from soft white to a pulsing blue. That's our cue, Reed said. Davis, Zhang, you're first. Secure the bottom of the shaft. Davis stepped into the access shaft and immediately felt a strange sensation, like being gently pulled downward while simultaneously floating. She descended rapidly but controlled, emerging at the lower level with her weapon raised. Zhang appeared beside her a second later. The corridor before them was empty, but they could hear the sounds of commotion in the distance. The diversion was working. One by one, the rest of Alpha Team joined them. Reed consulted his display, then pointed left. Detention cells should be 50 meters that way. Stay sharp. They moved as one, a well-oiled machine of tactical precision. As they rounded a corner, they encountered their first Concord security personnel. Two beings that resembled upright canines with 4 arms each, wearing what appeared to be ceremonial armor that nonetheless emanated energy readings. Davis didn't hesitate. She fired twice in rapid succession, the pulse weapon discharging with little more than a soft thump. Both security guards collapsed, incapacitated but unharmed. Nice shooting, Zhang muttered as they stepped over the unconscious aliens. I didn't spend all that time in diplomatic training, Davis replied. I kept up with the range. According to their intel, the detention area would be behind a secured door at the end of this corridor. As they approached, Reed signaled for them to take positions on either side of the entrance. Bioscanners again, he noted, and these will be higher grade. Zhang, can your toy handle it? Zhang shook his head. Not this model. We'll need to do this the old-fashioned way. Which is? Davis asked. In answer, Zhang pulled out a small cylindrical device and attached it to the door's control panel. We knock, loudly. The breaching charge detonated with a muffled thump, and the door slid partially open, jammed in its track by the damage. Reed immediately moved forward, forcing the door open wider with his armored shoulder. The team flowed through the opening like water, securing the room beyond with practiced efficiency. Inside was a circular chamber with 6 transparent cells arranged around the perimeter. 5 of the cells were occupied by the Uppsala scientists, while the 6th stood empty. Dr. Mitchell! Davis called, moving quickly to the nearest cell where her former professor stood wide-eyed at the sudden intrusion. Kira, Mitchell replied in disbelief. What in God's name are you doing here? Jailbreak, Davis explained succinctly, as Zhang worked on deactivating the cell's force field. By order of Admiral Hayes and the Security Council, we're taking you home. The force field flickered and died, and Mitchell stepped out cautiously. The others, we're getting all of you, Reed assured her, as the team worked on freeing the remaining scientists. But we need to move fast. This is an extraction, not an invasion. Within moments, all 5 scientists were free. They looked disheveled and tired, but otherwise unharmed. Davis quickly explained the plan as they moved back toward the access shaft. The Concord is going to be extremely unhappy about this, Dr. Mitchell warned. They consider themselves the supreme authority in this sector of space. They should have thought about that before they decided to hang scientists for doing their jobs, Davis replied grimly. Reed's comm crackled. Alpha, this is Beta. We have a problem. The station is initiating lockdown protocols. Our exit route is being sealed. Options? Reed demanded. Working on it, came the terse reply. Gamma reports they're facing resistance. The diversion won't hold much longer. Davis looked at Reed. The diplomatic docking bay. The Defiant is still attached there, supposedly for the delegation to attend the proceeding. Reed frowned. That's on the other side of the station, through the most heavily populated areas. It's also the last place they'll expect us to head, Davis countered. And Captain Ortiz can have a shuttle ready at the diplomatic airlock. After a moment's consideration, Reed nodded. Beta, change of plans. Meet us at coordinates section D15. We're taking the scenic route. The scenic route turned out to be anything but. With the station on high alert, they were forced to move through service corridors and maintenance tubes, occasionally encountering station personnel who were quickly stunned before they could raise an alarm. The scientists, though not trained for combat operations, kept pace admirably. Dr. Mitchell in particular seemed to have found a second wind, her initial shock at the rescue giving way to determined focus. I should tell you, she said quietly to Davis as they paused at an intersection, waiting for Reed to check their route. The Concord has technology far beyond what we've developed. Their ships, their weapons, we can't match them. We're not trying to, Davis replied. We're just getting our people out. Mitchell shook her head. You don't understand. They consider this station sacred space. The very act of forcing entry is, in their eyes, an unforgivable sacrilege. They won't let this go. Before Davis could respond, Reed signaled them forward. Beta team has secured the pathway through the next section. We need to move now. They pressed on, the combined teams now escorting the scientists through increasingly ornate corridors. The architectural style had shifted from the utilitarian design of the detention levels to something almost cathedral-like, with soaring ceilings and intricate patterns etched into the walls that seemed to move and change as they passed. "We're entering the ceremonial heart of the station," Mitchell explained in a hushed tone. "This is where the Concord Council meets." "Fantastic," Zhang muttered. "A tourist attraction and a combat zone." They turned a corner and found themselves at the entrance to a vast chamber, the same one Davis had seen in the holographic transmission. The execution platform stood empty in the center, but the tiered seating around it was partially filled with various alien species, apparently in the midst of some kind of emergency session. "Back!" Reed hissed, pulling them behind a decorative column. "We need another route." "There isn't one," Mitchell said. "The diplomatic docking bay is directly on the other side of that chamber." Davis peered around the column. The chamber was impressive, easily 100 meters across, with the ceiling rising in a perfect dome overhead. Between their position and the far exit that would lead to the diplomatic bay, at least 50 aliens of various species were engaged in what appeared to be a heated debate. "They're arguing about us," Mitchell realized, listening to the cacophony of alien languages. "About the humans who've infiltrated the station." Reed checked his tactical display. "The Defiant is still docked. Captain Ortiz reports a shuttle is standing by at the diplomatic airlock, but they've been ordered to prepare for emergency departure. We have maybe 10 minutes before they're forced to leave." "So we go through," Davis said simply. Reed looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Through a chamber full of the Concord's highest-ranking officials? That's not an extraction anymore, Lieutenant. That's a diplomatic apocalypse." "We're already past the point of diplomatic niceties," Davis countered. "They were going to execute civilians as an object lesson. I think the apocalypse has already begun." Before Reed could respond, a new alarm sounded, different from the security alert. This one a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. "That's the assembly call," Mitchell explained urgently. "All Concord species are being summoned to witness something." On the central platform, a holographic image appeared, a real-time feed showing the UNS Defiant still docked at the station. Surrounding it were several alien vessels that had taken up aggressive positions. A voice boomed throughout the chamber, the translation coming through clearly. "The primitives have violated the sacred sanctum. Their vessel remains at our mercy. They will surrender their infiltrators and submit to Concord justice, or face immediate consequence." Davis exchanged alarmed glances with Reed. The Concord was threatening the Defiant, with over 300 crew members aboard. "We need a new plan," Reed muttered. "If they open fire on the Defiant—" "Actually," Dr. Mitchell interrupted, a strange light in her eyes, "I think I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." "This is insane," Zhang whispered as they prepared to implement Mitchell's plan. "You realize that, right?" "Do you have a better idea?" Davis whispered back, adjusting the scientist's torn clothing to make her look more disheveled. "Because I'm all ears." Mitchell stood between them, her expression resolute. "It will work. The Concord values ceremony above all else. Their entire social structure is built around it." Reed, who had been listening to updates from the bridge of the Defiant, rejoined them. "Admiral Hayes says we have 5 minutes before she's forced to order the ship to disengage, with or without us. The Concord vessels are powering weapons." "Then we do this now," Mitchell said firmly. "Remember, no matter what I say in there, follow my lead. This is about saving lives, all our lives." Reed looked skeptical but nodded. "Alpha Team, take positions as discussed. Beta, you're on Overwatch. Be ready to move on my signal." Davis helped Mitchell remove the jacket of her environmental suit, leaving her in the simple gray underclothes that the Concord had provided during their captivity. "Are you sure about this?" Mitchell offered a thin smile. "Not remotely, but it's better than watching everyone die in a pointless show of force." She squared her shoulders. "Let's go face the music." With that, Dr. Eleanor Mitchell walked out from behind the column, directly into the vast ceremonial chamber, alone and seemingly defenseless. The effect was immediate. A hush fell over the assembled aliens as they spotted the human walking slowly but deliberately toward the central platform. Security personnel moved to intercept her, but Mitchell raised her hands in the universal gesture of surrender, and called out in a clear voice, "I come to address the Concord under the right of final address." The security personnel hesitated, looking toward the raised dais, where several particularly ornate beings sat in what appeared to be positions of authority. One of them, the same reptilian being who had announced the execution, rose and spoke. "The primitive invokes sacred custom. This is unexpected." Mitchell continued walking until she reached the central platform, then stood tall despite her disheveled appearance. I am Dr. Eleanor Mitchell of Earth. You have accused me and my colleagues of trespassing in sacred space, a crime for which you intended to execute us. You now threaten a vessel containing hundreds of my species for the actions of a few who sought only to prevent an unjust sentence. Her voice echoed through the chamber, the translation systems carrying her words to every alien present. Under your own customs, as recorded in the archives of Nexus, any being sentenced to death has the right of final address, to speak not just their final words, but to challenge the justice of their sentence before the full assembly. The reptilian being regarded her with what might have been surprise, if alien expressions could be read accurately. You have knowledge of our customs? We studied your publicly transmitted protocols extensively before approaching conquered space, Mitchell replied. We sought understanding, knowledge, peaceful contact. Instead, we found arrogance and cruelty masked as justice. Murmurs swept through the assembled aliens, some seemingly angry, others perhaps troubled. The right of final address is granted, the reptilian conceded after consulting briefly with its colleagues. Speak your challenge, human. Mitchell took a deep breath. My challenge is simple. You have judged humanity without knowing us. You have condemned us as primitives unworthy of respect or consideration. You have sentenced us to death for crossing a boundary we did not know existed. She gestured to the holographic display still showing the standoff between the Defiant and the Concorde vessels. Even now, you prepare to destroy hundreds of innocent lives to punish a perceived transgression. Is this the justice of an advanced civilization? Is this the wisdom your Concorde claims to embody? The reptilian started to respond, but Mitchell raised her voice, cutting him off. I challenge your judgment on the grounds that you have violated your own most sacred principle. Knowledge before action, understanding before judgment. These words are inscribed on the very foundation of this station, yet you have made no effort to understand humanity before condemning us. A different alien rose, this one vaguely insectoid in appearance. The human speaks our founding creed. This is troubling. We came to learn, Mitchell continued, gaining momentum. My colleagues and I are scientists, explorers. We seek knowledge, understanding. We discovered what you call the sacred nexus by following energy patterns that suggested a natural phenomenon. We had no way of knowing it held cultural significance. No warning buoys, no transmitted alerts in any frequency we could detect. She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly rather than just the leadership. Before you destroy a ship full of scientists and diplomats, before you execute 5 researchers whose only crime was curiosity, I ask you this. What does it say about your Concorde if your response to a new species is immediate condemnation without attempt at communication? What kind of galactic community executes first and asks questions later? From her position at the edge of the chamber, Davis watched in amazement as Mitchell, disheveled, exhausted, but radiating a quiet dignity, held the attention of the entire alien assembly. This was a side of her former professor she'd never seen before. Not just brilliant, but commanding. The reptilian and insectoid beings conferred with others on the dais, their discussion inaudible to the assembly. Finally, the reptilian spoke again. Your words are not without merit, human. But the violation remains regardless of intent. The sacred nexus is not merely culturally significant. It is a dimensional nexus point, a place where realities converge. Tampering with such forces, even in ignorance, risks catastrophic consequences. Then teach us, Mitchell replied immediately. If the concern is safety, then education is the solution, not execution. Humanity has much to learn, but we are quick students. We have gone from atmospheric flight to interstellar travel in less than 3 centuries. Imagine what we might accomplish as allies rather than condemned primitives. Davis's comm unit vibrated subtly against her skin. A message from the Defiant. Concorde vessels powering down weapons. Continue standby. A ripple of something like hope ran through the extraction team. Mitchell's gambit was working. The insectoid being stepped forward. The human's challenge has merit under the founding creed. I move for suspension of judgment pending further evaluation. Several other aliens indicated agreement, while others seemed to object. The reptilian appeared conflicted. The human infiltration of this sacred station remains a grave offense, it insisted. Such violation cannot go unanswered. Then answer it proportionally, Mitchell countered. My colleagues who came to extract us did so because they believed we faced unjust execution. They acted out of loyalty and compassion, qualities I would hope the conquered values. Judge their actions in that context. Davis tensed as Mitchell turned and gestured directly toward their hiding place. Lieutenant Davis, Commander Reed, please join me. Show the conquered that humans face consequences directly. It was a calculated risk, part of Mitchell's plan, but still a moment that could go catastrophically wrong. Reed hesitated only briefly before nodding to Davis. Together, they stepped out from cover and walked slowly toward the platform, their weapons pointed downward in a non-threatening posture. The security personnel immediately moved to intercept them, but the insectoid raised a limb in a clear gesture to wait. "You brought weapons into the sacred chamber," the reptilian noted, its voice carrying tones that the translator rendered as outrage. "We brought means to protect ourselves and extract our people," Reed replied evenly. "We have not fired upon anyone in this chamber, despite having the opportunity. Our mission was rescue, not conflict," Davis added. "We're soldiers following orders to protect our people, just as your security personnel follow their orders to protect yours. The difference is that our people were scheduled for execution without trial or representation." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, some evidently arguing, others questioning. The leaders conferred more urgently on their dais. Mitchell caught Davis's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval. The plan was working, creating enough doubt and division among the conquered species to force a reconsideration. Finally, the reptilian being raised its arms, and a resonant tone silenced the chamber. "This situation is unprecedented," it announced. "The human's challenge carries weight under the founding creed. Yet the violation of sacred space cannot be dismissed." The insectoid stepped forward again. "I propose a compromise. The human scientists will be released to their vessel, but representatives must remain to participate in a full conquered inquiry into this incident." "And the extraction team?" Mitchell pressed. "They will be permitted to depart, but their actions will be recorded as a formal grievance against your species," the reptilian replied stiffly. "Future diplomatic relations will depend upon the outcome of the inquiry." Davis and Reed exchanged glances. It wasn't perfect, but it was far better than execution or a firefight that would likely end with the destruction of the Defiant. "Who would remain for this inquiry?" Mitchell asked carefully. "You, as the leader of the scientific expedition," the insectoid responded, "and one representative from your military, to answer for the intrusion." Mitchell didn't hesitate. "I will stay. I propose this challenge, and I will see it through." Reed stepped forward. "I will remain as military representative. My team was acting under my orders." Davis immediately protested. "Commander," Reed silenced her with a look. "That's an order, Lieutenant. You'll escort the scientists and the rest of our team back to the Defiant." The reptilian being made a gesture that the translator didn't interpret, but which seemed to signal acceptance. "It is agreed. The humans will depart, save for these two who will participate in the inquiry. Security will escort them to the diplomatic docking bay." Mitchell turned to Davis and spoke quietly. "This is the best outcome we could hope for. Get everyone home safely." "We'll come back for you," Davis promised. "I'm counting on it," Mitchell replied with a small smile. "But preferably through diplomatic channels next time." The journey back to the Defiant was tense but uneventful. Escorted by conquered security, Davis led the remaining scientists and extraction team members through ornate corridors to the diplomatic docking bay, where a shuttle from the Defiant waited. As they boarded, Davis took one last look back at Nexus Station. Somewhere in that massive structure, Mitchell and Reed were preparing to face an alien inquiry that would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and the galactic community. Captain Ortiz was waiting when they arrived back on the Defiant, along with Admiral Hayes, whose expression was unreadable as she surveyed the returning team. "Lieutenant Davis," Hayes acknowledged. "I see we're missing Dr. Mitchell and Commander Reed." Davis straightened to attention. "They volunteered to remain for a conquered inquiry, Admiral. It was the condition for our peaceful departure." Hayes nodded slowly. "A calculated risk. Explain what happened." Davis provided a concise account of Mitchell's invocation of the right of final address and the subsequent compromise. When she finished, Hayes was silent for a long moment. "Dr. Mitchell showed remarkable understanding of conquered protocols," the Admiral finally said, "and considerable courage. She believes the inquiry is genuine, Admiral," Davis added, "that there's a real chance to establish diplomatic relations on more equal footing." "Perhaps," Hayes replied, her tone neutral. "Or perhaps she's bought us time to prepare for what comes next." The Admiral turned to Captain Ortiz. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed." And Mitchell and Reed? Davis couldn't help asking. Hayes's expression softened slightly. We're not abandoning them, Lieutenant. But this situation has escalated beyond a simple extraction. The Security Council needs to be briefed, and Earth needs to prepare for all possibilities. All possibilities, Davis repeated. Including the possibility that the Concorde's response to our actions may be more severe than a simple inquiry, Hayes said bluntly. Get some rest, Lieutenant. I suspect you'll be spending a lot of time in briefing rooms once we reach Earth. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Kira Davis stood at the observation window of Luna Defense Station, watching as the massive orbital shipyard swarmed with activity. Since the Nexus Station incident, Earth's unified government had accelerated the construction of its fledgling defense fleet, converting research vessels and cargo haulers into armed ships with remarkable speed. Impressive, isn't it? Said a familiar voice behind her. Davis turned to find Admiral Hayes approaching, her uniform immaculate as always. It's certainly determined, Davis replied. Though I'm not sure 5 hastily armed ships constitutes a fleet capable of standing against the conquered. Hayes smiled thinly. It's not about winning a war, Lieutenant. It's about making any potential conflict costly enough that diplomacy becomes the preferable option. Any word from Mitchell and Reed? As a matter of fact, yes. Hayes handed Davis a datapad. This transmission came through an hour ago on the emergency channel we established. It's from Commander Reed. Davis quickly scanned the message, her eyes widening. The inquiry is an actual legal proceeding? They're being permitted to present evidence? Apparently, Dr. Mitchell has impressed some influential members of the Concord with her knowledge of their customs and her argument that humanity was judged prematurely. Hayes leaned against the window frame. Reed reports that several species within the Concord are now questioning the leadership's handling of first contact with Earth. So there's hope? There's always hope, Lieutenant, but there's also reality. Hayes gestured toward the bustling shipyard. Which is why we continue preparations. The Concord needs to understand that while we prefer peace, we're prepared for the alternative. Davis frowned, studying the Admiral's expression. You're not telling me everything. Hayes regarded her for a moment, then sighed. Sharp as ever. Very well. The Security Council has received intelligence suggesting the Concord is not as united as they would have us believe. The execution order for the Uppsala scientists appears to have been pushed through by a faction within their leadership, not a consensus decision. Which means politics is politics, regardless of species. Hayes straightened. It also means we have an opportunity. The inquiry may be legitimate, but it's also a political battlefield where the future of human-Concord relations is being determined. Davis realized what the Admiral was suggesting. You want to send reinforcements, not military, diplomatic. Hayes smiled. Precisely. Mitchell and Reed are doing an admirable job, but they need support. People who understand both the diplomatic protocols and the tactical situation. People like me, Davis said, already knowing where this was heading. Ambassador Wu has requested you specifically for his team, Hayes confirmed. Your knowledge of the station layout, Concord security, and your personal connection to Dr. Mitchell make you uniquely qualified. When do we leave? Tomorrow. The UNS Intrepid has been retrofitted as a diplomatic vessel. Hayes's expression turned serious. This mission is critical, Lieutenant. Not just for Mitchell and Reed, but for Earth. We need to establish ourselves as equals in the galactic community, not supplicants begging for acceptance. Davis nodded. I understand, Admiral. Good. Hayes turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Lieutenant? You might be interested to know that your friend Specialist Zhang has volunteered to join the mission's security detail. Despite everything, Davis found herself smiling. He's probably just hoping for another ride in an insertion pod. Aren't we all? Hayes replied with unexpected humor. Briefing at 0600 tomorrow. Don't be late. The UNS Intrepid was considerably larger than the Defiant, having been converted from a colony supply ship into Earth's second purpose-built diplomatic vessel. Its original cargo bays had been transformed into conference rooms, living quarters for diplomatic staff, and a surprisingly extensive research facility. Davis found Zhang in the ship's mess hall the day after their departure, methodically disassembling and cleaning his sidearm. Expecting trouble? She asked, sliding into the seat across from him with a mug of coffee. Always, he replied with a grin. But I hear this is supposed to be all diplomacy and handshakes this time. No sneaking through maintenance tunnels or stunning guards. Disappointed? Relieved, actually. Zhang reassembled his weapon with practiced efficiency. I've seen enough combat to know that talking is always better, when it's an option. Davis sipped her coffee, grimacing at the taste. Apparently, the Intrepid's culinary capabilities matched those of the Defiant. So why volunteer for this mission? Zhang shrugged. Same reason as you, probably. We left people behind. Doesn't sit right, even if they volunteered. Before Davis could respond, the ship's communication system activated. All senior staff report to the primary conference room, came Captain Takagi's voice. We've received a transmission from Nexus Station. Zhang quickly holstered his weapon. That was fast. We're still 3 days out. They made their way to the conference room, where Ambassador Wu and his team were already assembled, along with Captain Takagi and the ship's senior officers. Ah, Lieutenant Davis, Wu greeted her. Please join us. The transmission specifically requested your presence. Davis raised an eyebrow but took a seat at the table. A moment later, the large display screen at the end of the room activated, showing Commander Reed's face. He looked tired but unharmed. Commander, Captain Takagi acknowledged. We're receiving you clearly. Reed nodded. Intrepid, good to see you're on schedule. I don't have much time, so I'll be brief. The inquiry has taken an unexpected turn. Dr. Mitchell's arguments have created significant divisions within the Concord leadership. Is that good or bad? Wu asked cautiously. Both, Reed replied. Several species are now advocating for human inclusion in the Concord on adjusted terms. Others are doubling down on their position that we're primitive and dangerous. And the inquiry itself? Davis asked. Reed's expression tightened. It's becoming a proxy for this larger debate. Mitchell has been brilliant, using their own historical records to demonstrate patterns of prejudice against newly discovered species. She's essentially put the Concord itself on trial rather than humanity. Commander Reed, Wu said carefully, are you suggesting that Dr. Mitchell has turned a defensive position into an offensive one? That's exactly what I'm saying, Ambassador. Reed actually smiled slightly. She's forcing them to confront their own hypocrisy. Several junior species in the Concord are now speaking openly about their own experiences of discrimination and arbitrary judgment. Davis felt a surge of pride. It was exactly the kind of intellectual judo Mitchell had been known for in her academic career, turning an opponent's strength against them. What do you need from us? Takagi asked pragmatically. When you arrive, Reed said, expect to be invited directly to observe the inquiry. Mitchell has secured that right under Concord Protocol. Ambassador Wu, your team will need to be prepared to formally present humanity's case for recognition as a sovereign spacefaring civilization, with all accompanying rights. Wu nodded gravely. We'll be ready. Lieutenant Davis, Reed continued. Dr. Mitchell has specifically requested your assistance in presenting evidence regarding the Uppsala incident. Your perspective as both a diplomatic officer and a participant in the extraction will be valuable. Understood, Commander. Reed's image flickered slightly. I need to go. We're operating on borrowed communication privileges. One last thing. When you dock at Nexus Station, expect a divided reception. Some Concord representatives will be welcoming, others openly hostile. Ambassador, I strongly recommend maintaining a visible security presence without appearing aggressive. A delicate balance, Wu observed. Welcome to galactic politics, Reed replied dryly. Read out. As the screen went dark, Ambassador Wu turned to the assembled team. Well, it seems our mission parameters have expanded considerably. We're no longer simply providing support for an inquiry. We're representing humanity in what amounts to a trial for our species' place in the galactic community. Captain Takagi frowned. My orders were to support a diplomatic mission, not participate in an alien tribunal that could determine Earth's future. Your orders, came Admiral Hayes' voice as she entered the conference room. Have been updated, Captain. All heads turned as Hayes strode to the head of the table. Davis hadn't even realized the Admiral was aboard. Earth Command has been monitoring the situation closely, Hayes continued. We anticipated this development, which is why I'm personally accompanying this mission. She activated the table's holographic display, showing a strategic overview of Nexus Station and its surrounding space. Intelligence suggests the Concord is internally divided on how to proceed with humanity. Some factions view us as a potential asset, others as a threat to be contained or eliminated. Dr. Mitchell and Commander Reed have successfully exploited these divisions to create an opening for actual diplomatic engagement. Hayes looked around the table, her gaze intense. Make no mistake, this is not just about Mitchell and Reed anymore. This is about humanity's place in the galaxy. The precedent established here will affect our species for generations to come. Admiral, Wu said carefully, with all due respect, my team has prepared for standard diplomatic protocols, not a trial by alien standards. Which is why Lieutenant Davis's experience will be crucial, Hayes replied. She's observed their procedures firsthand, worked with Mitchell, and understands the stakes. Davis felt the weight of every gaze in the room. I'll do whatever is needed, Admiral. Hayes nodded. Good, because I'm appointing you as special advisor to Ambassador Wu's team for the duration of this mission. You'll serve as liaison between the diplomatic corps and my security personnel. Security personnel that apparently includes you, Admiral, Takagi noted with a raised eyebrow. Hayes smiled thinly. Earth Command felt the situation warranted my personal attention. Translation: the government was worried enough to send its most senior military officer. Davis fought back a surge of anxiety. This was rapidly evolving beyond a simple diplomatic mission. We have 3 days to prepare, Hayes continued. I want continuous drills on conquered protocols, comprehensive briefings on known species and their political alignments, and security scenarios for all possible outcomes. She fixed each of them with a steady gaze. Humanity has one chance to establish itself as a peer to the galactic community, not a subject. Let's make it count. Nexus Station loomed large in the viewport as the Intrepid approached 3 days later. Davis stood on the bridge beside Ambassador Wu, watching as the massive structure grew steadily larger. Impressive, isn't it? Wu murmured. To think that beings from dozens of worlds cooperated to build something of this scale. Or that they use it to stage public executions, Davis replied dryly. Wu gave her a sidelong glance. Our task is to ensure they reconsider that particular cultural practice, at least where humans are concerned. Incoming transmission from Nexus Station, reported the communications officer. They're directing us to Docking Bay 12. That's in the diplomatic sector. A good sign, Wu noted. During the Uppsala incident, the research vessel was directed to a quarantine bay. Captain Takagi nodded to the helm officer. Take us in, nice and easy. Maintain passive scans only. As the Intrepid maneuvered toward the designated docking bay, Davis studied the station's exterior more carefully than she had during the extraction mission. What had seemed like random patterns of lights and surfaces now revealed themselves as intricate designs, symbolic representations of the various species that made up the Concorde. Reception committee assembling in the docking bay, reported the sensor operator. Mixed species composition, including several we haven't encountered before. Admiral Hayes, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. Ambassador, it appears you're about to make humanity's first formal diplomatic contact with the Concorde. Are you prepared? Wu smoothed his already immaculate attire. As ready as one can be to negotiate with an alliance of alien species that was recently preparing to execute our citizens. That's the spirit, Hayes replied with unexpected humor. Lieutenant Davis, you'll accompany the ambassador's party. Keep your eyes open and your sidearm concealed but accessible. Davis nodded, touching the diplomatic uniform she now wore. The outfit had been specially designed with hidden compartments, including one that currently housed a compact pulse pistol. The docking procedure completed with a gentle shudder throughout the ship. Captain Takagi turned to Wu. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Wu nodded gravely. Let's make history, shall we? Preferably the kind that doesn't end with interstellar war. The diplomatic team, consisting of Wu, 3 senior diplomats, Davis, and 4 security personnel, including Zhang, in ceremonial uniforms, proceeded to the airlock. Admiral Hayes had elected to remain aboard initially. Her presence was a card best played at the optimum moment. As the outer door of the airlock slid open, Davis got her first unobstructed view of the Concord Reception Committee. 8 beings of varying morphologies stood in a semicircle, their diverse forms ranging from vaguely humanoid to utterly alien. The reptilian being who had presided over the justice proceedings stood at the center, flanked by the insectoid who had advocated for Mitchell's challenge. Ambassador Wu of Earth, the reptilian being said, its translation coming through clearly on the devices they'd been provided. I am High Arbiter Sesk of the Tzolk'in Dominion, senior representative to the Concord Council. Your vessel and delegation are granted temporary diplomatic status within Nexus Station. Wu bowed slightly, exactly the degree they had calculated would convey respect without subservience. High Arbiter, the people of Earth thank you for this opportunity to address the misunderstandings that have arisen between our civilizations. Sesk's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but something in its posture suggested tension. Misunderstandings is perhaps too mild a term, Ambassador. Your military forces violated our most sacred space. Such actions among established Concord species would constitute an act of war. Yet here we stand, engaged in dialogue rather than conflict, Wu replied smoothly. A testament to the wisdom of the Concord's founding principles, which value understanding before judgment. The insectoid being made a sound that the translator didn't catch, but which seemed to be amusement. The human diplomat quotes our principles as readily as the scientist. Perhaps they are not as primitive as some suggest. Sesk's head swiveled toward the insectoid. Counselor Vrick, the humans' facility with our language does not negate the gravity of their transgressions. Wu interjected before the exchange could become more heated. If I may, High Arbiter, we have traveled here not to dispute the seriousness of recent events, but to participate in good faith in the inquiry that has been established. We seek understanding on both sides. Sesk regarded Wu silently for a moment, then gestured toward a corridor leading from the docking bay. The inquiry reconvenes in one standard rotation. Your delegation will be provided appropriate accommodations. Lieutenant Davis is requested to report to the preparation chamber immediately to consult with Dr. Mitchell regarding her testimony. Davis stepped forward, surprised to be singled out. I would be happy to meet with Dr. Mitchell. I will escort you, offered Counselor Vrick, its multiple limbs making a complex gesture that didn't translate but seemed conciliatory. Ambassador Wu nodded his approval, and Davis followed the insectoid being, aware of Zhang's concerned glance as she separated from the main group. As they walked through the ornate corridors of the diplomatic sector, Davis studied Vrick more carefully. The being stood nearly 2 meters tall, its exoskeleton a rich blue-black that seemed to shimmer under the station's ambient lighting. Multiple compound eyes constantly shifted, seemingly taking in every detail of their surroundings. You were part of the extraction team, Vrick said suddenly, its translator rendering the words in slightly stilted English. Davis considered denying it, then decided honesty was the better approach. Yes, Counselor. I volunteered for the mission. To save your former teacher. Davis glanced sharply at the alien. You've been well briefed. Dr. Mitchell has been forthcoming about her connections to Earth and its people. Vrick's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. She is a most unusual being. She challenges without disrespect, questions without accusation. That sounds like her, Davis agreed. She always said the best scientists are those who can question everything without belittling anyone. They turned into a quieter corridor, the architectural style shifting subtly. You should know, Vrick said, its voice lowered, that the inquiry has become far more than an investigation into the Uppsala incident. It has catalyzed long-simmering tensions within the Concord itself. Davis kept her expression neutral. In what way, Counselor? The Concorde includes 32 spacefaring species, Lieutenant, but only 7 hold council positions. The rest, observe and comply. Vrick's compound eyes shifted rapidly. Dr. Mitchell's challenge has given voice to those who question this arrangement. That wasn't her intention, Davis said carefully. Intention is irrelevant. Effect is what matters. Vrick stopped before an ornate door. Your species has arrived at a pivotal moment in Concord history. Your actions may tip the balance toward reform or entrenchment. Before Davis could respond, the door slid open to reveal Dr. Eleanor Mitchell, looking considerably better than when Davis had last seen her. She wore what appeared to be Concord attire, flowing robes in neutral tones that somehow complemented her human form. Kira, Mitchell exclaimed, genuine warmth in her voice. Thank you for bringing her, Counselor Vrick. The insectoid being made a gesture that seemed respectful. I leave you to your preparations, Dr. Mitchell. Remember, the third chamber convenes in one standard rotation. As Vrick departed, Mitchell ushered Davis into what appeared to be a comfortable living space adapted for human use. You have no idea how good it is to see a familiar face. Likewise, Professor. Davis embraced her briefly. You look well for someone who's been on trial for 3 weeks. Mitchell smiled wryly. Not exactly on trial anymore. More like the star witness in a constitutional crisis. She gestured for Davis to sit. I assume Admiral Hayes has briefed you. To an extent, Davis replied, taking a seat on what was surprisingly close to an Earth-style couch. Though Counselor Vrick just suggested you've sparked some kind of political revolution. Not intentionally. Mitchell sighed, joining her. I simply applied basic anthropological principles to the situation. The Concord structure has obvious parallels to historical Earth empires, dominant species enforcing their cultural norms on junior members under the guise of civilization and order. And you pointed this out to them? Davis asked incredulously. Not in those exact words, Mitchell replied with a hint of mischief. But I did present historical examples from their own archives, showing how newer members of the Concord have faced similar judgments to humanity, accused of violations they couldn't have understood, subjected to penalties that served more as demonstrations of power than actual justice. Davis shook her head in amazement. And this resonated with the junior species. More than I anticipated, Mitchell admitted. It seems the Uppsala incident provided an opportunity for long-suppressed grievances to surface. Several species that joined the Concord within the last 5 centuries have now formally petitioned for a review of the entire organizational structure. Which explains why High Arbiter Sesk seemed ready to breathe fire when we arrived, Davis observed. Sesk represents the Old Guard, species that founded the Concord millennia ago, and believe their seniority entitles them to perpetual authority. Mitchell leaned forward. But Vrick and others see an opportunity for evolution. They believe the Concord must adapt or eventually fracture. And where does humanity fit into this political powder keg? Mitchell's expression turned serious. That's what tomorrow's session will determine. We're either the catalyst for a more equitable Concord, or the excuse the founding species need to reassert their dominance. No pressure, Davis muttered. Indeed. Mitchell reached for a datapad on a nearby table. Now, about your testimony. The inquiry will want to hear your account of the extraction mission, specifically, your decision-making process regarding the use of force. Davis frowned. My orders were to recover the Uppsala team with minimal casualties. Yes, and how you executed those orders is crucial, Mitchell explained. The Concord values protocol and restraint. The fact that your team stunned rather than killed security personnel, that you created a diversion rather than a frontal assault, these details matter enormously in their ethical framework. I was just following standard operating procedure, Davis said with a shrug. Which is exactly the point I've been making, Mitchell replied with enthusiasm. Humanity's standard operating procedure includes respecting life even during military operations. This contradicts the narrative that we're primitive or inherently violent. Davis considered this. So you want me to explain our tactical decisions in ethical terms? Precisely. Mitchell handed her the datapad. I've prepared some notes on how Concord ethics translate to our military protocols. Review them before tomorrow. Davis accepted the device, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility. Professor, what happens if this goes wrong? If the Old Guard prevails? Mitchell's expression turned solemn. Then Earth needs to be prepared for a hostile galaxy, Lieutenant. The Concord has the technology to blockade our entire solar system if they choose. And some factions would consider that an appropriate response to our transgression. Admiral Hayes has been accelerating fleet construction, Davis noted. Good, Mitchell said grimly. Because while I believe diplomacy can succeed here, we'd be fools not to prepare for failure. The third chamber of Nexus Station was smaller than the main assembly hall, but no less impressive. Curved walls rose to form a perfect dome overhead, the surface inscribed with what appeared to be the translated text of the Concord's founding principles. The chamber was arranged in concentric circles, with the innermost ring containing a raised platform where witnesses would present testimony. Davis sat with the Earth delegation in a section reserved for visiting species. Ambassador Wu and his team were reviewing final notes, while Admiral Hayes, who had finally emerged from the Intrepid, sat calmly observing the various alien representatives as they took their positions. Interesting architecture, Hayes murmured to Davis. Notice how the senior Concord species occupy the sections with the best acoustics and sightlines. Subtle power dynamics built into the very structure. Davis hadn't noticed, but now that Hayes pointed it out, it was obvious. The 7 council species had positions that allowed them to communicate easily with each other while maintaining optimal views of the proceedings. Junior species were relegated to sections where they would need to strain to follow the discussions. Dr. Mitchell says the entire Concord is structured like that, Davis replied quietly. Nominally equal, practically hierarchical. Common enough in human history, Hayes observed. Empires rarely advertise themselves as such. Further conversation was cut short as a resonant tone filled the chamber, signaling the start of proceedings. High Arbiter Sesk entered from a private access point, followed by representatives of the other council species, including Vrick. The Concord inquiry into the Uppsala incident and subsequent events reconvenes, Sesk announced formally. Today we hear testimony from the Earth delegation regarding the military incursion into Nexus Station. The reptilian's gaze fixed directly on Davis. Lieutenant Kira Davis will provide account of the human extraction operation, its objectives, and its methods. Ambassador Wu nodded encouragingly as Davis rose and made her way to the central platform. She had memorized Mitchell's notes and rehearsed her testimony extensively. But standing now before representatives of dozens of alien species, she felt a momentary flash of anxiety. Taking a deep breath, she centered herself. This wasn't just about her or even the Uppsala team anymore. This was about humanity's future among the stars. "Esteemed representatives of the conquered," she began, her voice steady. "I appear before you as both a military officer who participated in the extraction mission, and as a diplomatic attaché committed to peaceful resolution of conflicts. I will answer your questions truthfully and completely." Sesk gestured to a holographic display that appeared beside the platform. "The record shows that armed human operatives infiltrated Nexus Station, disabled security personnel, and removed detainees who were awaiting lawful sentence. Do you dispute these facts?" "I do not dispute the actions," Davis replied carefully. "But I respectfully suggest that context matters in understanding those actions." A murmur ran through the chamber. Davis continued. "When Earth received the transmission showing 5 of our scientists facing execution for what appeared to be a simple navigational error, our leaders were faced with a choice: accept the deaths of innocent civilians or attempt to prevent them. The sentence was determined according to conquered law," Sesk countered. "Our methods were designed to preserve life, not take it. And our objective was to prevent what we perceived as an unjust execution, not to challenge conquered authority." She paused, then added, "We are not asking the Concord to ignore our actions, but to understand them, just as we are working to understand your customs and protocols. Is this not the essence of the understanding before judgment philosophy inscribed on the very walls of this chamber?" The tentacled being rippled in what appeared to be approval. "The human's argument has merit under our traditions. Perhaps we have been hasty in our judgment of this species." For nearly 2 hours, the questioning continued, with various council members and representatives of other species probing Davis's account of the extraction mission. Throughout, she maintained her composure, repeatedly emphasizing humanity's commitment to minimal force and the preservation of life. Finally, Sesk indicated that the questioning was complete. "Lieutenant Davis has provided thorough testimony regarding the human military action. The inquiry will now hear from Admiral Joanna Hayes regarding Earth's broader security policies and intentions." As Davis returned to the Earth delegation, Ambassador Wu nodded approvingly. "Well done, Lieutenant. You've given Admiral Hayes a solid foundation to build upon." Hayes was already moving toward the central platform, her bearing commanding respect even among the alien representatives. Davis watched with interest. The Admiral had been surprisingly close-lipped about her planned testimony. "Representatives of the Concord," Hayes began without preamble, "I appear before you not to offer excuses or apologies, but to establish clarity regarding Earth's position in galactic affairs." Her directness seemed to catch the council members off guard. Hayes continued, "Our species is young in terms of interstellar travel, but ancient in terms of civilization. We have survived thousands of years of our own conflicts, environmental challenges, and technological revolutions. Through this crucible, we have learned certain immutable truths that guide our interactions with others." Hayes began to pace slowly around the platform, her voice carrying effortlessly throughout the chamber. "First, we recognize that diversity of form, thought, and culture is not merely to be tolerated, but embraced as essential to growth and adaptation. Second, we understand that communication must precede judgment, that assumptions about others' intentions often lead to tragic and unnecessary conflict." She stopped, facing Sesk directly. "And third, we know that the measure of any civilization is not its technological advancement or military might, but how it treats those with less power." The chamber was utterly silent now. Every alien representative focused intently on the human admiral. "When we received word that 5 of our scientists, peaceful researchers whose only crime was curiosity, faced execution without trial or representation, we responded as any sovereign species would. We acted to protect our citizens." Hayes's voice remained measured, but carried an unmistakable note of steel. "Not with fleets or ultimatums, but with a precise, limited operation designed to minimize harm while achieving a necessary objective." Sesk leaned forward. "You describe an illegal military incursion in such reasonable terms, Admiral. Yet the fact remains that armed humans violated our most sacred space. And the fact remains that the Concord was prepared to execute civilians for an unintentional trespass," Hayes countered. "Which action more accurately reflects the principles inscribed on these walls?" A low murmur ran through the chamber. Hayes had effectively turned the inquiry back on the Concord itself. "You speak boldly for a representative of a single-planet species with limited interstellar capability," Sesk observed, a note of warning in its translated voice. Hayes smiled, a thin, dangerous expression that Davis recognized all too well. Bold words are the luxury of those with nothing to lose, High Arbiter. Humanity does not enter this galactic community as a supplicant, but as a sovereign civilization with its own values and strengths. She gestured toward the Earth delegation. We come seeking cooperation, exchange, and mutual growth, but make no mistake, we will protect our people, our principles, and our autonomy, with every resource at our disposal. The tentacled council member rippled in a pattern that the translator rendered as concern. Is this a threat, Admiral Hayes? Not at all, Hayes replied smoothly. It is simply a statement of fact. Earth desires peaceful relations with the Concord and all its member species. We recognize the benefits of galactic cooperation and the exchange of knowledge, but such cooperation must be built on mutual respect, not subjugation. She paused, looking around the chamber. I understand that some within the Concord view us as primitive because our interstellar capabilities are recently developed, but I would suggest that the age of a technology is less important than the wisdom with which it is employed. Counselor Vrick's compound eyes shifted rapidly. The Admiral speaks with unusual directness for a species in your position. Perhaps that is precisely why we should be heard, Hayes responded. Fresh perspectives often reveal blind spots in established systems. For nearly an hour, Hayes fielded increasingly pointed questions about Earth's military capabilities, expansion plans, and diplomatic intentions. Throughout, she maintained a delicate balance, neither antagonizing the Council nor showing weakness. Finally, Sesk indicated that the session was concluding. The inquiry has heard testimony from the human delegation regarding both the specific incident and their broader intentions. The Council will now deliberate before rendering judgment. As the Earth delegation was escorted from the chamber, Davis fell into step beside Hayes. That was direct, Admiral. Hayes's expression remained neutral until they were in the private corridor leading back to their assigned quarters. Then she allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes, Lieutenant, the best defense is a clear statement that you're prepared for conflict, while simultaneously demonstrating you'd prefer to avoid it. Ambassador Wu, who had been walking ahead of them, slowed to join the conversation. A risky approach, Admiral. Some might interpret your statements as belligerence, and others as refreshing honesty, Hayes countered. The Concord needs to understand that while Earth may be new to interstellar politics, we're not naive or easily intimidated. Wu sighed. Perhaps. But my diplomatic team has spent years preparing for first contact scenarios based on cooperation and cultural exchange, not thinly veiled military posturing. With respect, Ambassador, Davis interjected. I think Admiral Hayes struck exactly the right tone. From what I've observed of Concord dynamics, they respect directness, especially when backed by principle. Lieutenant Davis is correct, came Dr. Mitchell's voice as she approached from a side corridor. The Council species respond to strength of conviction. It's written into their various cultural frameworks. Greetings were exchanged, and the group continued toward their quarters, Mitchell providing her assessment of the day's proceedings. The junior species representatives were particularly impressed with Lieutenant Davis's testimony, she noted. Your invocation of the ethical gradient principle resonated strongly with them. Many have felt its selective application in their own dealings with the Council. And my contribution? Hayes asked with a raised eyebrow. Mitchell smiled. You successfully established that humanity won't be bullied without explicitly threatening anyone. Nicely calibrated, Admiral. So what happens now? Davis asked as they reached their assigned common area. Mitchell's expression turned serious. Now we wait. The Council will deliberate, possibly for several days. They're not just deciding our fate. They're navigating internal political pressures that we've inadvertently intensified. Meaning? Wu prompted. Meaning that however this ends, the Concord will never be quite the same. Mitchell gestured for them all to sit. You've arrived at a pivotal moment in their history. The power dynamics that have existed for centuries are being questioned, and humanity has become a symbol in that debate, either of necessary change or dangerous disruption. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. So our fate hinges not just on the merits of our case, but on which faction prevails in their internal power struggle. Precisely, Mitchell confirmed. Though I believe we've made significant inroads with key influencers like Counselor Vrick and the Morali representative, the one with the tentacles. Ambassador Wu looked troubled. I dislike having Earth's future determined by alien political maneuvering beyond our control. Welcome to galactic politics, Ambassador, Mitchell replied with a wry smile. Though I suspect Admiral Hayes has contingency plans should diplomacy fail, Hayes neither confirmed nor denied this, merely offering an enigmatic smile. For now, Mitchell continued, we maintain a dignified presence, continue informal discussions with sympathetic representatives, and prepare for all possibilities. Davis glanced around at her companions, the brilliant scientist who had turned an execution into a constitutional crisis, the seasoned diplomat navigating unfamiliar waters, and the admiral who had subtly reminded an interstellar council that humans weren't to be trifled with. Against all odds, they might just pull this off. 3 days later, Lieutenant Kira Davis stood with the Earth delegation as they were once again escorted into the third chamber. The atmosphere was noticeably tenser than before, with security personnel from several species positioned strategically throughout the space. They're expecting trouble, Zhang murmured beside her, his eyes constantly scanning for potential threats. From us, or from within? Davis wondered aloud. Both, I suspect, Mitchell replied quietly, having joined them for this final session. The council deliberations have apparently been contentious. Ambassador Wu adjusted his formal attire. Whatever their decision, we must respond with dignity and restraint. Admiral Hayes, resplendent in her dress uniform with its impressive array of decorations, simply nodded. Of course, Ambassador. Dignity and restraint are always preferable, until they're not. Before Wu could respond to this somewhat ominous statement, a resonant tone signaled the arrival of the council members. The chamber fell silent as Sesk and the other 6 senior representatives took their positions, followed by what appeared to be representatives from every Concord species. This is unusual, Mitchell whispered. A full assembly suggests something significant beyond our case. Sesk rose, his reptilian form drawing all attention. The inquiry into the Uppsala incident and subsequent events has concluded. The Council has reached its determination regarding both the specific circumstances and the broader question of humanity's relationship with the galactic Concord. The High Arbiter's gaze swept across the Earth delegation before continuing. Regarding the Uppsala scientists, the inquiry finds that while they did indeed violate restricted space, the lack of clear notification or warning buoys constitutes a mitigating factor. Their detention was justified. Their scheduled execution was not. They are hereby released from all charges. A murmur of reaction rippled through the chamber. Mitchell squeezed Davis's arm in a gesture of restrained celebration. Regarding the military incursion, Sesk continued. The inquiry acknowledges that while the methods employed showed restraint, the action itself constituted a serious violation of Concord's sovereignty. Under normal circumstances, this would result in diplomatic sanctions and restricted access to Concord space. Hayes tensed slightly beside Davis, but maintained her neutral expression. However, Sesk's voice took on a different tone. These proceedings have revealed systemic issues within Concord protocols that require addressing. The Council has therefore decided that this incident will serve as the foundation for a comprehensive review of first contact procedures, proportional response guidelines, and the rights of non-member species within Concord jurisdiction. Councillor Vrick stepped forward. In recognition of the legitimate concerns raised during this inquiry, and in light of humanity's demonstrated commitment to both the protection of their citizens and the minimization of harm, the Council extends an invitation to Earth to participate in this review process as an observing consultant. Davis blinked in surprise.
This was far more positive than anyone had anticipated.
Sesk resumed speaking, though Davis thought she detected reluctance in the reptilian's bearing. Regarding humanity's broader relationship with the Concord, Earth is recognized as a sovereign spacefaring civilization with all attendant rights and responsibilities. Formal diplomatic relations are hereby established, with provisions for cultural, scientific, and limited technological exchange. The High Arbiter paused, then added what seemed to be a carefully worded qualification. While full membership in the Concord requires further evaluation and development, Earth is granted provisional associate status, permitting regulated access to designated Concord facilities and trade routes. Ambassador Wu stepped forward. The people of Earth thank the Concord Council for this judicious decision. We accept the establishment of formal relations and look forward to participating in the review process as a constructive partner. Hayes moved to stand beside Wu. We particularly appreciate the Council's recognition of sovereign rights and proportional justice. Earth commits to responsible participation in galactic affairs while maintaining our core principles of autonomy and the protection of our citizens. The subtle emphasis on protection wasn't lost on Davis, nor, she suspected, on the Council members. After some further ceremonial exchanges, the session concluded. As the Earth delegation was escorted back to their quarters, an atmosphere of cautious optimism prevailed. "That went better than expected," Wu remarked once they were in private. "Associate status and a consulting role in policy review. Quite an achievement for a first formal contact." Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "The political implications are significant. Inviting Earth to participate in the review process is a major concession from the traditionalist faction." "Vrick and the reformists must have exerted considerable pressure," Davis observed. Hayes studied a datapad containing the formal agreement terms. "Let's not celebrate too enthusiastically yet. Regulated access and designated facilities give them plenty of room to restrict our movements while maintaining the appearance of acceptance." "True," Mitchell acknowledged. "But we've gained a foothold, legitimacy in the galactic community, and a voice, however small, in shaping its future protocols." "And avoided immediate conflict," Wu added, with a pointed glance at Hayes. The Admiral smiled thinly. "For now, Ambassador, for now." She set down the datapad. "I suggest we prepare for our return to Earth. The Security Council will want a full briefing, and we have extensive preparations to make if we're to properly engage with the Conquered going forward." As the others discussed logistics, Davis found herself drawn into conversation with Dr. Mitchell. "You were right," she told her former professor. "Aliens aren't inherently more enlightened than humans. They're just people, with all the complexity that entails." Mitchell smiled. "Perhaps that's the most important discovery of all. That regardless of biology or technological advancement, sentient beings across the galaxy share certain fundamental characteristics. They form hierarchies, they create rules, they protect their interests, and sometimes they learn from their mistakes." "And humanity?" Davis asked. "What's our role in all this going forward?" Mitchell's expression turned thoughtful. "That remains to be seen, but I suspect we'll be something of a wild card in galactic politics. We're too principled to be easily controlled, too adaptable to be dismissed, and just stubborn enough to challenge the status quo when necessary. So, troublemakers," Davis concluded with a grin. "Catalysts," Mitchell corrected. "For better or worse, humanity has already begun to change the Conquered simply by existing and refusing to accept automatic subservience. What happens next will depend on whether we can balance our independence with responsible participation." Davis glanced toward Hayes, who was deep in conversation with her security team. "Something tells me the Admiral is already planning for all contingencies." "As she should," Mitchell replied. "Peace through strength isn't just a human concept. The Conquered respects capability, even as it espouses cooperation." 2 weeks later, Lieutenant Kira Davis stood once again on the observation deck of Luna Defense Station. Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness of space, serene and seemingly untouched by the momentous changes in humanity's cosmic status. "Quite a view," said Specialist Zhang, joining her at the window. "Makes all the politics seem pretty small, doesn't it?" Davis smiled. "Sometimes. Then I remember that what we do here potentially affects everyone down there, and it feels pretty significant again." "Fair point." Zhang leaned against the railing. "So, I hear congratulations are in order. Special advisor to the new Conquered Relations Division?" "News travels fast," Davis remarked. "It's not official yet. It will be. Admiral Hayes specifically requested you. Said something about needing people who understand both diplomatic protocols and when to ignore them." Davis laughed. "That sounds like her." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as a shuttle departed from the station, heading toward the newly commissioned UNS Challenger, Earth's third interstellar vessel, designed with both diplomatic and defensive capabilities. "It's strange," Davis said finally. "A month ago, we thought we were alone in the galaxy, preparing for hypothetical first contact. Now we're navigating relationships with dozens of alien species, some of whom were recently ready to execute our scientists." "Welcome to the neighborhood," Zhang replied dryly. "At least we made a memorable first impression." "That we did." Davis turned as the observation deck door slid open, revealing Admiral Hayes and Dr. Mitchell in animated conversation. "Lieutenant," Hayes acknowledged with a nod. "Good, you're here. Dr. Mitchell has just received some interesting information from her Conquered contacts." Mitchell smiled in greeting. "The Policy Review Committee is being formed, and it includes representatives from 15 species, more than double the usual composition for such initiatives. It seems our little adventure has indeed catalyzed significant reforms." "The traditionalist faction can't be happy about that," Davis observed. "They're not," Hayes confirmed. which is why we're accelerating our preparedness initiatives. The Security Council has approved an expanded shipbuilding program and enhanced defensive systems for our solar system. Always the optimist, Admiral, Mitchell teased gently. Hayes raised an eyebrow. I prefer to think of it as practical idealism, Doctor. We hope for peaceful cooperation while preparing for less pleasant alternatives. And my new role? Davis asked. How does it fit into this balanced approach? You'll be working with both diplomatic and military personnel, Hayes explained. Your primary mission will be to build understanding between Earth and conquered species while identifying both opportunities and potential threats. Essentially, you'll be a bridge, Mitchell added. Someone who understands both cultures and can help prevent the kinds of misunderstandings that nearly led to tragedy. Davis considered this. Like explaining why executing scientists for taking readings is bad diplomatic practice? Hayes smiled. A genuine one this time. Exactly that kind of cultural translation, Lieutenant. Speaking of cultural translation, Mitchell said, the Concorde has formally invited Earth to establish a permanent diplomatic presence on Nexus Station. Ambassador Wu will be heading there next month with a full delegation, including security personnel with experience in Concord protocols, Hayes added meaningfully. Davis caught the implication immediately. When do I leave? 3 weeks, Hayes replied. That gives you time for additional briefings and preparation. Specialist Zhang and several others from your extraction team will accompany you. From jailbreakers to honored guests, Zhang mused. Quite a promotion. Don't get too comfortable, Hayes warned. The galactic community is as complex and potentially dangerous as any frontier humanity has faced. We've earned a seat at the table, but we'll need to be vigilant to keep it and to protect Earth's interests. Mitchell's expression turned serious. The Admiral is right. While many in the Concord are genuinely interested in mutual exchange and cooperation, others view us with suspicion or outright hostility. We'll be walking a diplomatic tightrope for the foreseeable future. Davis nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility being placed on her shoulders. I won't let you down, Admiral. Or Earth. I know you won't, Lieutenant. Hayes turned her gaze back to the blue planet below. Humanity has survived countless challenges throughout our history. Wars, plagues, environmental disasters, our own technological revolutions. We've always adapted, always found a way forward. Her voice took on a note of steel. And now we face our greatest challenge, establishing our place in a galaxy far older and more complex than we imagined. But if there's one thing I know about humans, it's that we don't back down from challenges. We meet them head on. And sometimes, Mitchell added with a smile, we surprise even ourselves with what we can accomplish. Davis looked from Hayes to Mitchell, the warrior and the scholar, both committed in their own ways to humanity's future among the stars.